I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. I'm so happy to have Susan Silver with us. She's going to talk about her book,
No problem.
Hot Pants in Hollywood.
Okay, so have a great shoot.
Thank you. All right.
I'm recording. I'm on your single shot now, Sandra, and I'm going to give you a countdown now.
Thank you very much.
No problem. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Welcome back to our show. I am so happy to have Susan Silver with us. She's going to talk about her latest book, Hot Pants in Hollywood. Welcome to I wish to tell you a little background about Susan Silver. Susan Silver, the main character, the protagonist in this book, Hot Pants in Hollywood, was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Susan Silver attended Northwestern University. She was graduated from UCLA. She started a very well-rounded career in TV production and advertising by doing casting. Her talents were fully engaged on the top national TV shows. Her first national TV job was doing casting for Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. She was the associate producer of the Mort Sahl talk show. Susan was one of the original writers of the Mary Tyler Moore Show, the Bob Newhart Show, Maude, and many other memorable, joyous sitcoms. She wrote 2 top 10 movies of the week, feature films, and pilots for her own sitcoms. Currently, she has published her memoir, Hot Pants in Hollywood, Sex, Secrets, and Sitcoms. She has appeared on CNN, HLM, Fox Good Day New York, and The Today's Show. She is a frequent guest on Boomer Issues for the growing Boulder radio program, Joan Hamburg, and others. She has a weekly commentary on TV Confidential, which appears on Spotify, LSYN, and Apple. It is called Susan Says. It covers politics, news, culture, reviews, and things that, to quote Susan, piss me off. In the segment called, Oh, Come On. Profiled in TV Guide, Esquire, and other publications, she has written op-ed pieces for the New York Times and Refinery 29. She has had a long-running column on New York Social Diary entitled The Search for Mr. Adequate. Susan Silver is called the voice for those past the Sex and the City bracket. She was recently profiled in the New York Times as a woman who overcame the odds. The profile was pointedly and properly called Because I Was a Girl. Read the book to find out exactly what that means. She has taught comedy at the Television Academy and the New School in New York. She has lectured at the Paley Center, SCAD, and Brandeis University. Hot Pants in Hollywood had me glued to its pages from the beginning to the end. It started with a bang, but to know what I mean, you will have to read the book. To give our audience a taste of your book, please, Susan, please describe some notable episodes in your book that you wrote for the Mary Tyler Moore Show when you were at MTM. For example, Room 223, Season 1, Episode 23.
Well, first I have to say that the title of my book, Hot Pants in Hollywood, is my wardrobe, not my behavior. I want that to be very clear to everybody, just in case. And the opening chapter is a little naughty, so I don't know if your mother wants to read it or you can tell her to skip the opening. But the Room 223 was a kind of a title off of Room 222, which Alan Burns and Jim Brooks had written for. That was a series also. And it was Mary going to take a writing class, and she invites Lou Grant to come and lecture, and it's a disaster. Plus, her teacher everything I wrote, I must tell you, I did for my own life because I didn't know you were allowed to make things up. So I went in to pitch stories, and this actually happened to me. I went out with a teacher, and he gave me a C. So I said, what do I have to do to get an A? And we won't go there. But Mary asks, and I think she kisses the teacher, Michael Tolan, and she gets a B+. The episode also shows how Mary really wanted to learn more and not just be, as we all had to be in those days, a secretary. We started out as secretaries always, even though I had no typing and shorthand. I had speed writing. I worked for a small television station in Los Angeles, and I did speed writing, and I never could read what I had taken from my boss, so I made up the letters. But he was an elderly gentleman. He didn't remember, so it worked out just fine.
Anyway, Susan describes this episode shows Mary's ambition and independence. It gives a strong female perspective, which was not exhibited at the time. Please make the...
You want to just say the thing is not rolling?
Exactly.
The teleprompter's not rolling.
She plays a dynamic in a way that keeps Mary's ambitions at the forefront. In room 223, the female characters are intelligent, empowered, and funny. They are not caricatures. The episode written by Susan that won an Emmy Award was Square-Shaped Room. Tell us about it,
That was
Susan.
for Ed Asner won his Emmy for it. He and his wife split up, and he's living in his own apartment, and he wants to have it redecorated. So Mary asks Rhoda to do it, and she does a very modern, clean, very, advanced kind of thing. He likes old-fashioned stuff, and he hates it. And when she's in the room, he says, "I love it. I love it." And then she leaves, and he says to Mary, "I hate it. I hate it." And he won an Emmy for that. And the fact that he thanked me on the air made my parents accept that I was a real writer, and it was like a great moment. Ed was a doll. He was a great guy. He was a very fun-loving, sexy bear.
A third example tells us about A Friend in Need. Take it away, Susan.
Well, A Friend in Need was my very first show, and it's something that all women have in their lives. Men don't know about this, but as I said, I never made anything up, so I went in and I pitched this. Every woman has to stand up for a wedding at some point in her life, maybe for somebody she doesn't love that much, and wear a really ugly dress. And I will say the designers did the best dress. It was a Bo Peep. I said all that was missing was the sheep. And the only thing uglier than her dress in pink was Rhoda's dress in purple. And that was my first show, and I will say it got the biggest laugh when she came out in that dress. It was one of the biggest laughs ever on the show.
A fourth example is A Friend Indeed.
Now that's another show that women will understand. Men play, when I was married, my ex always said to me, he can play sports with somebody he doesn't like as long as they pass the ball, Women, we have to like the person we're involved with. And you don't, even though you love your best friend, you don't necessarily want her to be at your job. And there's a job available open at the station that Rhoda could fill, and Mary doesn't tell her. And the staff of the series loved it because it was the first time Mary actually, the character Mary, who was so good, did something a little bad. And then, of course, she fixed it. But in the end, Rhoda didn't want the job anyway, so there.
Please tell us about your episode of the Mary Tyler Moore Show called What is Mary Richards Really Like?
Well, there was a guy in Chicago, a journalist, who said Mary has no sex life, and it was bothering him. So I went in and I said, gee, maybe we ought to give Mary a sex life. So I had her being interviewed by a reporter, and the tape recorder breaks, so she has to ask the questions and answers them. And then at the end, it's sort of hinted that they spend the night. So Mary now was sexy.
It gave her a character. In your book, you describe through your writing for TV how you addressed social and political issues through friendly humor. Kindly give us a sample of how you did this on your show, Maude.
Well, Maude was Norman Lear's series, and it was a spin-off of All in the Family. And it's an interesting thing because Norman, who was a wonderful guy, went on vacation that week. And so when I pitched the show to the producer, it was about, again, my own life. It was when I told my mother I was going to therapy, and she said, "Are you going to blame it all on the mother?" And I said, "Of course," which is what Maude freaked out about. But when Norman came back, since there was no pilot and he had written Maude to be his ex-wife's character, he kind of kept the story and rewrote it a little, but he left my credit on, which was very lovely of him. But again, in those days, only that girl had really shown a single woman and a career woman. And now Mary was someone who didn't really want to get married. She wanted to have a career. She had a family at the station. And Maude, it was so funny because even Maude said at one point, Mary Richards did such and such. So it was a real breakthrough show. Feminism started at that time, and it really showed women how to be both independent and fun.
You were at the beginning of women reaching out into the all-male world to have a career outside the home, not as a secretary or nurse or teacher, which were the realms women were really readily allowed into in the 1970s and 80s. In your book, you provide insights with humor and honesty about the challenges and triumphs of venturing into the male-dominated world. Can you give us a sample of some of your experiences when you reach into the male business world from your book?
Well, it's funny because when Me Too came out recently, I asked a lot of my friends. It didn't really happen to me, maybe because I was married and I had a big mouth, I don't know. But we did have some incidents. I was writing at the time, at the beginning, with a partner, Iris Rayner Dart, who wrote Beaches. We went into a show and the assistant said to the producers, "The secretaries are here." We said, "No, we're the writers." And then another producer, who I will not name, but he's named in my book, had a picture on his wall of women's breasts. So the entire time we were pitching the show, we had to look at the women's breasts, which was not the greatest time to have had. But I will say actresses probably had to do with Me Too more than we did. I did, however, escape 5 of the biggest gropers, of which I write 1 or 2 in the book, Bill Cosby being the number one. I was at UCLA. I was in theater arts, and my uncle was in showbiz, and he had a friend who was producing a show called Hootenanny, which was a Western music show. And he said, if you come to the show and you're very animated and you sit in the front row, we'll put you on camera, and then you can come to a party afterward at Theodore Brickell's house. I said, oh, great, that's wonderful. So I tried to be animated during the show, and then there was a break, and the guy said, well, after the show, you know, my client will take you to the party. I said, who's your client? And he said, Bill Cosby. And I didn't know who that was because he had not done anything. He had just done his first album. I thought he was a Western singer. So I went to the party with Bill Cosby. Everything was fine at the party. I was real intimidated to be there with Theodore Brickell and all these stars. And on the way home, Bill Cosby said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be a comedy writer. And he said, well, would you like to work with me? I said, would I? Yeah, I would love to. What do I have to do? We pulled up in front of my apartment. He said, well, you'll come over and we'll pitch story ideas and you'll get, you know, your first episode. I said, gee, that's wonderful. And then he lunged at me. And I was this sort of Jewish virgin at the time in college. It would have ruined my life, of course. I fell out of the car. I said I did the Lucille Ball exit. My legs were up in the air, and he drove off, thank goodness. And I escaped 1 or 2 other ones, so I was lucky.
Interesting. For a deeper, more comprehensive understanding of her personal experiences and how, why, and what helped her to move from one stage of her career to another, her memoir shows how she struggled and climbed the career ladder. It shows us how one stage prepared her for the next chapter in her life, why she went one direction, then transversed into another direction. She tells us who helped her and what way that was significant, and when that was not available, how she helped herself.
Well, in writing my book, I realized that I was really talking about the new 3 R's, not reading, writing, arithmetic, but reinvention, resilience, which I didn't know I had whatsoever, and relationships. I reinvented myself every 20 years. I think you have to do that and find a new passion and a new career. So after I retired from showbiz, I moved to New York, and I interviewed with 60 people to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And I met with someone who knew someone at the Anti-Defamation League, which fights anti-Semitism. And as a child, I had grown up in Milwaukee, where there was an active German Bund during the war. And my father was very active against it, and our lives were threatened, et cetera. So it was something I really knew and cared about. So I went to work for the Anti-Defamation League. I ran their speakers bureau. And we had offices all over the country, and I got to hire speakers from all walks of life to come to do that. And I also went to Washington to meet with various people, and that was a great job. And I did that for a few years. And then I went to work for the Simon Wiesenthal Center. I was the UN observer for the Wiesenthal Center. Of course, Simon Wiesenthal, one of the greatest fighters against anti-Semitism and Nazism. And that was an interesting experience because the UN is not the friendliest place towards Israel, but it was an interesting experience. And now I'm very involved with the Friends of the Israel Defense Force, which supports the soldiers in Israel. And I've adopted 3 soldiers that I sent to college who now are grown with their own families. And since I don't have families, they're my families. One is in Israel, one is in London, and one is in Florida. And so that brings me to the third thing of the 3 R's, which is relationships. I'm divorced. I don't have any sisters, brothers, or family. So I'm kind of a baby whisperer. One of these days I'll be arrested because when I see a cute baby, and I've adopted families and babies, and now I talk about one in the book that became my godchild, and now I have in my building my newest godchild, who's years old, that's F-W-E-E, and calls me Duda, because she can't say Susan, and I've written articles about her in Grandparents Magazine.
Have you tried to sing the Duda Day
No,
song?
but everybody now calls me Duda. The family that I went to visit the governor of Maine, who's a great friend, and everybody there was calling me Duda. So I have this precious kid who comes to visit me in the morning. We get into bed, we watch Peppa Pig, which I'm getting a little sick of, Bugs Bunny and Daniel Tiger, and then we play hide and seek, and she stands in the same place every time like this. So I say, honey, you know I can see you, right? And she also has a great sense of humor. I didn't know a 3-year-old could have a sense of humor, but so those 3 things. Resilience, which I really didn't know I had because I was a scaredy kid, and I was an only child, and I wasn't allowed to cross the main street until I was 12. So I somehow had to get over all those fears and wound up in China walking by myself and doing weird things. But if I broke a nail, it would be like the end of my life. And then as life goes on, I had cancer twice. I took care of both my parents as they were dying. I commuted. I was divorced. So you get through these things, and I didn't realize I had resilience till I wrote my book. So when I speak to younger women out there, I always tell them, you have it. You just don't know that you do.
Corey, how many minutes are we?
The clock is running. You have 17 minutes now.
17 minutes, okay.
8 more.
17 minutes left, okay.
No, you have 10 minutes left.
10 minutes left.
Oh, 11. You run at 28, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me know when you're ready. I'll pick the clock back up. So you're roughly at 17 minutes. And
Okay, well, I guess we'll talk about.
28 would be the real 28 minutes. Can you see the timer up there?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so 28 would be the end of the show.
Do you want to ask me about giving tips to writers? I can do that.
Oh, yes, I definitely would want you to do that. From your book, what would you like the audience to take away with them?
No, let me know when you're ready.
Okay.
You ready? You need more
I'm
time
not,
or you ready now?
I just have a few seconds.
All right, so just let me know. Give me the cue so I can, just give me the cue when you're ready.
You talk about,
You can talk directly to your camera. I just want to make sure you're in the same shot.
well, you basically talked about the same one. Okay, I'll go through the different parts of your.
No, well, you can start and say, is there anything,
Okay.
about writing that you want to talk about?
All right, Susan, what would you like to talk about in terms of what should a writer do about writing?
Well, as I said, back in the day, when I went to Northwestern and UCLA, They were very academic. I never even saw a real script, even though I won an award from the Writers Guild. Francis Ford Coppola, the director, was my graduate advisor, and we didn't even know what screenplays looked like. Now they have Scriptor, they have all these things. But back in the day, I thought you couldn't make anything up, so I always was talking from my own life, and everything I wrote was from my own life, and if I didn't have anything, I had to like look in the phone book. A, airplanes. B, I mean, I couldn't make anything up. But one good thing I always tell writers, as I've taught, is it's really good to stop in the middle of a sentence that night, so the next day you don't have to face that empty page, because that empty page is the hardest thing a writer ever has to face. So you stop in the middle and you know what that sentence is going to be, and you can start the next day and just keep going, which is something really good. Also, I think it's very important, and it was for the guys at MTM, at Mary Tyler Moore, since there had never been women's point of view before. There's a documentary out now called What is Mary Really Like? I can't remember, I'm sorry. But it's Mary Tyler Moore documentary on Netflix. And the guys, said then that there were things we had in our purses that they had never seen. So our stories were always bringing something that had not been shown before on television. And as a woman, our lives, and we communicate differently. It's very important to be authentic and to speak authentically so that the audience really believes it and it's happening too. And why Mary was such a big hit was as it came at the beginning of feminism, and it was like we helped feminism and feminism helped Mary. Now, Marlo was the first woman producer of her own show. She was great on That Girl, and my partner and I had said we had written a show where she gets engaged, and at the end she decided she didn't want to do that because she wanted to remain a career, so they never shot our show. Which was one of the frustrating things, and that's one of the reasons I retired from show business. I had the most episodes of anybody my first year. I had 13 episodes. I had 19 years, very successful, and I had so many things that weren't made. I had 15 movies of the week. 2 were top 10, the other 13 I couldn't get made. I did 5 features, they didn't get made. So it was like having a lot of things on the shelf, and after a while I just got sick of it. So as a writer, you really have to be very resilient, and fortunately during the time that I started, I didn't have to face rejection because they wanted a woman. I started on Mary Tyler Moore, which is like starting on the top. Everything was downhill for the next 20 years. I said, but it's a tough business, and you have to be very resilient, and you have to know that it's not going to be easy all the time, and rely on your successes, not your failures.
Remember your successes.
Right.
You taught how to write a sitcom. And these are certain things you suggested. Describe, practice, and be funny.
I said that in my book? Oh my goodness,
Yes.
I'll have to reread my book. Well, you know, it's not jokes. Jokes are what comics do and people write their material. You write for the character. When you're writing a show, the best thing to do is watch that show a million times and really imitate the voices. Mary sounds different than Rhoda. Lou sounds different than Mary. And you have to be able to deliver their voices. Jokes, they'll put in, or if you need to rewrite, you can put them in. It's really out of character and out of the story. And that's why it's called situation comedy and not joke comedy.
And it's the character who does something silly that's in character, that's funny.
Or does something out of character, as I said. And when she didn't want to give Rhoda the job, everybody was like, oh, Lou was so glad for once you're rotten, he said. It's so good to see that you're rotten. But when you're going in to pitch a show, don't pitch the character changing the first season, because the first season they're developing them the way they are. The second season you can go in and say, Mary's always nice, I'm going to pitch something where she's not. But that first season, don't try to change the characters because they've established them in a way. And what was so great about that show was those characters were so well created that if you watched the show, you knew as an audience how Mary was going to react, how Rhoda was going to react, what was going to happen. And that's why it was such a great show that lasted. Now when I speak to women's groups, women in their 30s and 40s are still so influenced by that show. And so many of them have come up to me and told me how much it meant to them, helped them prepare for a career, helped them be independent. It's a 50-year credit that, even though I'm between 50 and death, as Andy Mame said, and today's my birthday, so I'm 49 and death.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I will accept champagne and caviar from the viewers. No, but the important thing is that you know who you are and what you want to bring. That's your own story. That's your individual thing. You don't want to copy someone else. To be authentic will work for you.
Now, learn from the scripts was what you said, such as number of scenes, page length, rhythm.
Well, those are things you can get programs now on the internet, Scriptor, which tells you how to lay out a script. As I said, I had never seen, and my partner had never seen a real script, and we wrote an episode of The Odd Couple for Gary Marshall, was my manager and my mentor, the great Gary Marshall, director, producer. And we said, and then a scene, and then the bus comes through, and he said, excuse me, we're on a set. There's no bus. So you have to pay attention if it's a film show, if it's a in-house 4-camera show or 3-camera show. So now everybody knows. The students at SC and UCLA and schools in New York know more about it than I do even. So,
what is the difference between writing for a live show and writing for a film?
Well, that's another thing. You can't bring a bus into a set. You can bring it into a film show. Your audience is going to give you the laughs during a taping where there's an audience. So that's good, and you probably need more jokes that way. And you could always, in Mary Tyler Moore, you could always hear Jim Brooks laughing. He had a very distinctive laugh, and if you listen to the show, you can hear him laughing. And during the table reads, hopefully the other cast members would laugh, and that's how you decided. You did first you did an outline, then you did a first draft. You turned it in to them. Now they have writers' rooms where they all sit together in a room. I never did that. We wrote independently. I went home and did it. I don't call writing in a room writing. I call it spritzing. You throw things against the wall, and if you make other people laugh, and it's a very competitive thing, and I never was into that. I was asked to write for Saturday Night Live because Lauren Michaels was one of the writers on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In when I did the casting. But I didn't want to be in a room working till 10 at night yelling at each other, so there you go.
And seeing who could outdo the other person.
That's right.
3-camera shoot.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is when you're doing a 3-camera, it's on set, it's a different thing, everything happens, it's rehearsed, and then it's done as a play, whereas film is done in different groups of shots.
Practice to pitch your story either alone or to someone else.
Well, when you're pitching a story to go in, some people are really good writers and not good pitchers. My ex-husband became a comedy writer who was a stockbroker when we met, but he used to help me all the time, and he was a great audience. He would pitch to them. If you can't pitch a story and act it out and everything, get a partner who can. And my ex did the writing, and he got a partner to do the pitching. So you have to be able to tell the story, too, and hopefully make them laugh in the room.
Write a spec script for a particular show, but send it to a different show.
Yeah, it's not good. Like, if you love a show that's on, like, I don't watch comedies now, so I don't know what's on now, but let's say you loved Everybody Loves Raymond. They just had a reunion show. That was such a great show. If you want to write a spec script, you don't give it to them because they know their show better than anybody else. You write Everybody Loves Raymond, you give it to some other show, which will say, oh, she's good. She could write that show. She could write ours, too.
Would you give us what was your big break?
My big break was Mary Tyler Moore. Iris and I had written a Love American Style, and Mary Tyler Moore show came on, and I said to Gary, I can do that show. I'm from Milwaukee, she's from Minneapolis. People think it's the same place. I worked in a small TV station, she worked in a small TV station, so I need to get into that show. And Iris took a break to have a baby, and I was alone. I had never written anything on my own, so they weren't going to see me. But because it was Gary Marshall recommending me, they saw me. And as I said, I went in with 5 stories from my own life that they had never heard anybody talk about being a bridesmaid before, so they thought I was like a genius or something. Treva Silverman had been there before me. She was the first, I was the second. And in the course of the show, 25 women were hired after us.
How did A Couple Takes a Wife lead you to a new professional model?
Couple Takes a Wife was a movie the week I did.
Long form.
Pardon?
Long
form. When I was writing, and I was married at the time, I realized it would be really nice if I had a wife as well to do the cooking and the shopping and the other things, because to have a career and to be a housewife, it's 2 difficult things. In fact, I was offered, my second year I was offered to be on the staff of the Bob Newhart show, I took the job, and that night I dreamt that I was on, like Lucille Ball, on one of those assembly lines where the things were coming too fast, and I couldn't do it. I said, I don't want to do it. I don't want to work those hours. I don't want to be away from my husband, so I didn't do it. You really have to be able to do both. We never had children, so that was easier. But the couple takes a wife was Bill Bixby and, oh gosh, I can't remember the name of the gal, but Valerie Perrine was the wife, Paul Prentice, and they hired her to be their wife.
Well, Susan, I really have to thank you so much for coming on our show. You were quite wonderful.
Thank you.
Until the next time, this is Speak Up. I am Sandra Schulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Cut.
Shall I include